This episode of the Leap Forward podcast is brought to you by Bridge LT, leaders in conversational learning and innovation. Through AI role plays, technical simulators, and comprehensive training programs, Bridge LT is revolutionizing the future of corporate and enterprise education.
On this episode of Leap Forward, we're honoured to feature Winston Lee, Managing Director of ETI in Europe and a pivotal figure in the automotive sector. He dives into bridging the gap between original equipment manufacturers and the automotive aftermarket, discussing the vital roles of advanced diagnostic tools and specialised equipment. His journey highlights innovation and strategic partnerships, unlock insights for the automotive future. So absolutely delighted to welcome Winston from ETI to this edition of Leap Forward. Welcome, Winston.
Thank you, Justin. Yes, nice to finally meet you.
Absolutely, likewise. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. So look, first of all, introduce yourself and the organisation.
Okay, well, I'm Winston, as you say, and I'm the Managing Director of ETI in Europe. So what we do is put together the OEMs with the aftermarket. So the tool and equipment manufacturers that provide data, diagnostic tools, wheel and tyre stuff, ramps, ADAS equipment. So all of those sorts of products into the aftermarket. And equally, some of those aftermarket people provide products into the OEMs as well. So we're neutral, so we don't lobby. And we've got really good relationships in historical relationships with OEMs going back many, many years. So we have technical people, and we've got somebody that will be the front in the US to talk to the OEMs and other associations, and I'm basically doing that over in Europe. So I'm representing our members and the institute to other institutes and the OEMs. So
Fascinating. And give me a sense of the size, members and countries and sort of the size of the industry itself.
So membership has been North American based. Although saying that, my business was a member of ETI for probably, well, still are a member for 12, 13 years plus. So when I was looking at membership, I wanted to understand the US market because that's what they looked after. They looked after North America. There wasn't anybody else anywhere else doing what ETI do, but it was a big leg up for me because it put me in contact with the right people to speak to in terms of licensing data, distribution as well. So, being able to sit in front of somebody from a large distributor, being a small business in the UK, it's a huge thing. So
Yeah.
in terms of numbers of members, we've got over 100 members in the US, and we are nearly at sort of 30 members in Europe now. So predominantly it's been in the probably the last 10 to 15 years, very focused on ADAS and scan tools.
Yeah.
But traditionally it has had a lot of hand tools and other equipment companies involved in it. So that's my focus, is to get training involved, distribution involved. Distribution is very different, obviously, in Europe because every country's got a different way of doing things. And in the US, it's everybody does things the same way, so it's a lot easier to understand.
And you're relatively new to the role. So let's talk about you for a bit. So sort of effectively kind of like, give me a bit of a kind of potted kind of history to date.
So I started in the automotive industry sort of by accident, really, from the electronics point of view. So I started fitting car alarms in, I think, probably about 1990. for a shop. My dad knew a guy who had a couple of shops up in the northwest. I knew a couple of the guys that worked in one of them, and as you do as a lad, you sort of interested in cars and bikes and whatever else. And I just had this because somebody knew that I could do the electronic stuff. I just ended up going in at the weekends, and they would sell um, a, a car alarm from one of the big names in those days. So it was as that sort of industry was expanding in terms of add-ons for central locking and alarms that talk to you if you went close to the vehicle and warned you off, and so it was right at that time when I was interested in that technology, and a lot of people didn't really. And then I happened across a guy that I did some work experience at the at British Aerospace, and I met a guy there that was really interesting. He was into jazz. I like jazz, and he played for the Northern Jazz Orchestra. And we got we got talking. I got a project. He worked with me on it, and he moved to another company. I get a phone call. I changed my job, and um, if you if you want me to pop over and have a look, you'd probably be interested because it's cars. So there was a company in the northwest that made or still does makes springs for large engines, and at the time they were doing actuator springs for turbochargers. And I didn't want to do university or anything, and I liked working, so I ended up going to this company, and we did all sorts of fun things. Turbocharged a Fireblade, and worked on some real interesting cars. I mean, there was some stuff that would turn up that I would never have imagined that I'd ever seen. So it was interesting. So it was all of the things that I really liked. Technology, um, making stuff out of nothing. So I did that for a couple of years, and um, it was another opportunity that came through the guy that I'd met at aerospace. He was looking for another job again, and he found something that was a local company, um, and he said it's probably not really for me, but it might be really good for you. So I think you should go. So I ended up going for an interview at a company called Sykes Pickervan, which is hand tools, and at the time it was diagnostics. They were just starting out in diagnostics. I went for the interview, and it was for just repairing and fixing things, predominantly because they'd launched a new gas analyzer for new legislation, and it was based on a PC. So they didn't have anybody that could fix those things, and I knew what I was doing with PCs, and so I fell into that. I got accredited for doing calibrations, and I drove the little van and went and visited garages. So yeah, it gave me a really good sort of wide experience of even more sort of automotive stuff and other areas, not just nice.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to go down to the southwest, so down to their R&D centre, and I helped out on the production line, and they were having um, they were really selling a lot of product, and they needed to make sure that any of the failures that were coming through were fixed, and we were doing development on the fly really at the time, and that had to sort of tie in with all of the approvals that you'd gone through. So there was a lot of work, and there were quite a few people down there doing that, and I really liked it. It went on from there, working in repairs and sort of the end of line production stuff in terms of seeing stuff drop off and fixing it. And we were doing work for Jaguar Land Rover, Vauxhall at the time when Vauxhall was around. And I went basically from there into the engineering department, having done not a lot of software at school or anything. And Richard put me in at the deep end, and he gave me the support. They're really good bunch of guys working there. So it was very, very early on in diagnostics. So they were reading blink codes from cars, translating the
Wow.
pulses to a code rather than, watching the light on the dashboard. It would translate that into some text. Then it was the very basic serial diagnostic protocols, and a lot of it wasn't documented. So there was a lot of reverse engineering that went on. Um, Everybody had their own way of doing it. So this is before a lot of the standardization went on. So it was really quite interesting, and the dealers were at the level where it took a lot of effort to try and diagnose a problem, because you not only had to have the electronic tool, but you had to have some translation of what all that meant. So it was really exciting times to see
Yeah.
all of those
Transformative, right?
things. Yeah. It was exciting to see what was happening, and I'd never have thought that it would have got to the stage that it's got to with autonomous driving and stuff so quickly. I mean, it just seems like a blink of an eye. And I said to you earlier, I've written a list of dates because I can't remember everything, but um, it's a very short piece of paper in terms, like it's 1.5 pages of big writing, so I can see it. But you think in that short space of time, relatively, there's a lot happened, and a number of times through my career, if you call it that, I've thought, how long is this going to last? You know, um, when's it all going to be? I suppose it goes back to the OEM thing, really. When are the OEMs going to look after all of this? When isn't there going to be an aftermarket? Legislation comes along, and things are difficult, and processes are hard. I mean, it was actually quite hard at the beginning because a lot of the tools were embedded tools. So, um, it wasn't easy to reverse engineer. It's very manual. And then as it went from, we as a business, we looked at engine management, ABS, and airbag because that's all that was on a car. Um, and it was relatively easy to keep up to date with it because it'd have a handful of codes and a handful of components. And now you look at all of the systems that are on a car, and each headlamp's got its own ECU, and it's just become bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's become very difficult to keep up with that without licensing the data. So going back to the ETI thing, it was really important for me to have those conversations at the time that I was having them with ETI, because we needed to understand how it was all going to pan out. So just when you think, the water's coming up to here, I'm struggling, you find another way. So yeah, tools changed. They went on to tablets and PCs, and reverse engineering became, there was a different strategy applied to reverse engineering. Now it's on the cloud in a lot of cases, so it's another level of complexity. And then you've got all of the security now that's around vehicles, which is important.
Hmm.
Certainly with autonomous driving, it's very important that those things are kept secure. Um, so I agree that we need to have the security and the legislation to manage that. It's just, how do we make sure that people can fix the cars properly? So that's the ETI thing, really. Is there's that opportunity to do that. So um, I did my own thing in about 2004. So going back a little bit, I I got married and we had a son, and I moved back up north, and I worked for Genrad for a year. So they were doing the WDS and the FDS, I think it would have been called at the time, which was the Ford diagnostic system, the Jaguar Land Rover stuff. They were doing a lot of telematics. They got bought by Teradyne. Um, and yeah, so about 2001-ish, I moved back up north and did a year in Stockport. And the idea was I was going to go into training. That didn't work out because they, I think they must have just been bought by Teradyne, but there was some changes that went on. I started, the guy that I was supposed to be working for was made redundant the day I started, and so I got a little bit involved in what the engineering team were doing because they just bought Auto Diagnose and Master Tech. Again, looking back at what could have been done then if we knew what we knew now, it's quite shocking, really. You sort of think, Master Tech had this huge database of case-based reasoning in terms of fault and fix information that was all run from an Access database. So there was a huge amount of data that they gathered from people ringing in. I've got this make, model, year, engine code. It's got this problem, and then they would go through technical information and diagnostic procedures. They would come to a fix, hopefully, and then that fix would get put on the system. And then the next time somebody rang up, it would sort of narrow things down. They launched that at the ATS show in 90s. No, not 90s, early 2000s. They would have done that. And they launched that with a rover application. And it was like a proper, fully functioning, end-to-end fault to fix thing. So it would give you a fault code. It would say, right, plug these probes in, do that, measure this voltage, get this scope probe, put it in there, measure that. And it would bring in all of this data, and then it would then try and work out the likely causes, and then give you some fix information. And then there was a discussion about how many man-years it would take, engineer years it would take to cover everything, and it was, until the end of time and beyond. So it never really sort of progressed any further than that. So I ended up going back to Sykes, and I worked in OEM sales, if you like, with a guy called Dennis Jarvis, who had been at Sykes for forever and knew all the OEMs, and we did special tools. So when they were developing a new vehicle, we'd do a new tool. So we worked with the independent guys in Birmingham who were bringing in Subaru and Isuzus and things like that, and some of the sort of more obscure names, doing some bits again, sort of linked up with what was going on down in Wiltshire with the electronics that they were doing with Jaguar Land Rover and Rover at the time. So we did a lot of work on Rover 75 when they were making those, with an audio systems tester and end line and stuff. So that was really interesting job. I really enjoyed that. And then opportunity came up to go back down to Wiltshire again, and I thought, "Oh, I'd like it down there." So I moved back down to Wiltshire and went back into engineering there. I'd actually started my own company before then, doing IT support. So we were just doing PC bits and
Yeah.
websites, and it was coming up to the year 2000 at the time when I started it. So I did a Y2K course, and then we did some Y2K assessments for businesses, which was great because it was evenings and weekends, because people wanted to run their businesses, and if you had someone poking around in your PCs, you wanted to do that out of hours. So
And where are we now timeline wise? How far away are we from ETI?
in all of that, I left. started up full time doing some contract work for somebody. We ended up taking on some software work to bring a gas analyzer into the company for a Swedish business. Um, and then Sykes Pickavant got sold by there was a buyout from Stanley bought Facom. Facom didn't want Sykes, so it got sold off. So we basically came back in as their R&D arm for a couple of years, developed a product, and then they decided that they wanted to change direction. So basically, we bought the diagnostics division away from Sykes Pickavant, and we became SP Diagnostics. So that was about 2009. And then it was great because we could do some of the interesting stuff that we felt that we wanted to do. We knew we couldn't be doing all of the systems on all of the vehicles because we couldn't afford the licenses, and so we knew we had to go niche. So we started a tow bar tool with a company called Westphalia who manufacture tow bars. So again, you'd never have thought that you'd had to have programmed a tow bar into a car. Well, so many systems that are reliant on knowing whether it's towing something or not. So driver assistance systems, anything from stuff that's going to save your life to the stuff that's going to annoy you when you put it in reverse and it beeps at you because you've got a trailer behind you. So yeah, lane assist, adaptive cruise, all of those things, rather than bypassing all of them, Westphalia and others at the time wanted to do a more integrated job. So yeah, we put a product together for them, and they're still doing that now. So it's a big part of what they do. And then in 2011, we started to do some stuff with training. So we'd got a technical support line. We brought some more people in. We were helping a company called Train for Auto, doing some support for the garage auto union, GAU. So yeah, answering calls and organising the training schedules, those sorts of things, which was interesting because the training was part of your membership to this GAU, and the training came free, and lots of people didn't turn up because people didn't put a value on it, and which is a sad thing in the industry, really, that at that time people didn't see that there were
Yeah.
there
Value in
was
training.
this
Yeah.
value in the training, and there was this gap that was extending in terms of people that were retiring, people that didn't want to learn anymore, people that had real estate that was worth more to them to sell and retire off than it was to hand down to family to continue to run. So we did see a lot of change over those years. And then we came up with a product for cleaning turbochargers through that. And at the same time, we were approached by a battery company that was concerned about the way that all of a sudden you had to code batteries in. So, 1 minute you're coding tow bars in, and the next minute you're coding batteries in. So it was all around stop-start technology, AGM batteries. They needed to be charged properly, and as they degrade, they get charged differently. So putting a battery in a vehicle that was used to charging an old battery, you had to tell it that it was, so you weren't coding the battery in, you were just telling the vehicle, hey, look, we've put a new battery in. So we helped that business put together a plan, and they launched a whole marketing effort behind this idea of demystifying what it was all about. They didn't want a tool initially. They just wanted to go around to tool manufacturers and have them implement the software. But a lot of people just said, well, how much are you going to pay us? So they didn't get very far with a lot of the tool manufacturers, which was a real shame. But we ended up doing a deal with them on a tool. So very cheap basic tool that did everything that they needed it to do, and they wanted it dual branded. So it had our logo on it, and as you can imagine, the day it got launched, we had a number of phone calls from other people that, oh, yeah, we could do with that. So we were very, very busy for quite a chunk of time doing that.
Where does that get us up to?
Where are we there? So around that gets us up to about 2011, 12, and then 2015, more legislation. I mean, this industry is quite legislation driven because that's where you sell product basically, isn't it? So we put together a product that was based on a very cheap technology, sensing wise. It was better than the smoke meter that was being used for MOTs. A load of work, a load of lobbying and talking to the various different agencies about it, but we just never got any traction with it at all. But at the time we were developing it, I needed some investment. It got to that point where we'd grown from, a handful of people to, I would say, 14 people at that time.
Getting up to 2025.
Yeah. So in the last 8 years, I carried on running what was effectively the SP Diagnostics business for 4 years. I actually had Richard Smith, who originally employed me, who had retired. He'd been a contractor, he'd done a load of work. I'd used him as a contractor as well. So he became the managing director. I became the technical director. I did that for a bit. He retired then again. 2 years later, I became the MD again. And then I moved to Yorkshire, up to where Bartek is based, and I became the group technical director. We developed the particle number counter, so that's new legislation that has actually been now mandated for all EU member states. UK doesn't come into the equation,
Right.
so it needs to happen, but we'll wait and see. But yeah, so we did the particle number counter, and then the whole thing with the ETI came up. They had a 2-year project to look at the viability of doing it. So not for profit. So they'd spoken to a number of people, interviewed some people. They'd asked my opinion of what I thought in terms of did I think it was viable. I thought, well, it's very different over in Europe. Legislation's different. A lot of the companies are already doing B2B. But it was an opportunity to help some startups because, and has already been shown that some of the new people in the industry, and I'm talking about maybe even people that have been in it for 3, 4, 5 years, still don't have those really difficult contacts
Yeah,
to find within the
that's
OEMs.
right. Huge barrier, right?
Massive barrier. Yeah, yeah. It's a bit like buyers. They tend to move them around because no one wants to make friends. Because they keep it a bit interesting, and they're small departments. In fairness, it's not an OEM's business selling data.
Yeah.
So yeah, from that perspective, I can understand from the OEM's point of view that they've got a massive team of people, so they're strapped. They're strapped for time. They're strapped for resources. There's a lot of paperwork involved in it. It's not straightforward. I mean, it's their crown jewels that they're licensing, so they have to be very careful with the way they do that. So yeah, basically they just said, look, we're looking for someone to head it up. Do you want to do it? So it was. I'm 50 this year, and I thought, you know what? If I'm going to do something else and have another stage to my career, I need to do it now. So it's going to benefit the 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 people that I can associate with because I understand the whole development
Yeah.
cycle and I know how difficult it is. And I've sweated over stuff, over millions of cups of coffee in a hotel room in France, trying to work something out, not having had the data. So to be able to help now members get hold of stuff that they need.
I mean, you've been so. I mean, it's a fascinating story. You've been so instrumental in, from the very beginning, right? I mean, 30 something years. I'm trying to do the maths on the fly, and yeah, I can't. Just with my limited knowledge, I can't think of anyone better placed to kind of be doing the role, I suppose, in a sense. And you talked about you talked about autonomous vehicles and sort of, kind of, I guess, we've talked a lot about the past,
Mm.
kind of what's led you to here. What I'd love to hear about is sort of like, what's the future? What does the future look like?
We need more people that are going to get into the industry. That's clear. I mean, I watch your podcasts, I watch other podcasts, and read what's going on and talk to people and the event that happened as part of Automechanica in Birmingham, the Motivate thing was a great opportunity to try and get people involved in the industry. So yeah, the future is getting people, and not just young people, people from other areas of industry that have done other things that maybe want to change, or things are changing. I mean, it's interesting that in the States they suffer from losing vehicle technicians into the wind turbine business because they're building wind turbines, and mechanical and electrical capabilities, it rolls over onto that. And equally, there have to be other industries that maybe aren't so predominant now, but that skill set would roll over into some of the things that are going in automotive. Um, so yeah, I mean the future is making sure that we've got a properly trained industry, whether that's OEMs or aftermarket, doesn't matter.
Yeah, diverse and
Yeah.
with the skills that we need. And what are those skills? Like, what? Tell me a little bit about sort of, that future. What are the skills? You plotted this incredible kind of, I think, sort of, sort of evolutionary kind of, like, sort of history. Kind of, what are the skills and what are those jobs of tomorrow? What are the paradigm shifts that you're sort of seeing?
It's still a mix of skills, isn't it? And I wasn't at the event in Detroit, the ETI event in Detroit the other week, but Vlad, um, who I met at an event last year, talked about converging of automotive and aviation, and all of that stuff's going on because people want to put people in something to move them, don't they? So if you talk about mobility, there's uh, EVs have a place. I'm not sold on them myself. In every instance, some places they work, some places they don't. So there's got to be a workforce that understands all of that. You know, so there's software involved in that, understanding how systems communicate with each other. Less mechanical than the traditional ICE engines, but then people are still going down the road. You can look at the Chinese manufacturers that are coming into Europe. They're hybrids, so they've got that mix. So you still need to have a wide range of skills. Certainly if you're in the aftermarket and you want to be um, not a specialist but an all makes garage, you're going to have a huge range of skills. So um, yeah, the future is having people that have a number of abilities, I think, or decide to specialize in one thing. And again, legislation, I think, is going to drive that. So, when you look at ADAS, um, if that was to be part of the PTI MOT, um, it's going to be an interesting situation because some systems are dynamic. So you've got to have someone drive the vehicle. Some systems are static. Well, some systems are static and you need a small area. Some you need, a huge stage with the right type of floor. It's garage environments that don't exist at the moment. So, is that going to breed a new type of garage? Is it going to breed a specialist that only does that. A bit like glass, at the moment, people that do glass, predominantly, don't they? So, yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of cars that have had glass issues, and they've come out, replaced the glass, and then I've had to go somewhere else then to have it calibrated, and it's part of the deal. They don't leave you in the lurch, um, but it's an added bother, if you like, for the end user, the driver, to make the experience of ownership better. Then all of those things are going to have
Work
to
more in
be thought
harmony and
about.
thought through.
Yeah. So the future is very different, I think, in terms of managing all of
And
those.
what's ETI's role in that?
So we've basically got to understand what's happening in legislation. So, whilst we're not lobbying, we keep an eye on what's happening, because it's really important. Because um, I've used a bit of an analogy to a number of people about how I see what what the ETI does, and you've got lobbyists that tend to push down from the top, if you like, um, and try and put weight on the OEMs to disclose information or whatever it might be, whatever they're deciding to lobby against at the time. And what we're trying to do is work from the ground up with engineering departments. So one of the events, the one that we just had, is more focused around the engineering type people within OEMs. So we had 11 OEMs come to the last event. Um, the other side of it is more the tool and equipment people. So they're looking at talking to um, sales and marketing parts of our membership to try and find out what products and tools are available and that sort of thing. Um, so from a technical point of view, it's about delivering what's happening to our membership and understanding what our membership needs to happen, and trying to push that up through the engineering departments who have got a different approach to it. When you start lobbying someone, they get the legal teams involved, and it all becomes about that. Whereas you need to meet in the middle somewhere. So, like I say, my analogy has been sort of, hitting from the top, and then sort of trying to massage from the bottom up, and somewhere in the middle, hopefully, there's some workable solution that comes out of it. Um, you've got to understand that the OEMs have got to make money, um, but equally, it's explaining, and I think they do understand to a degree
Hmm.
that it's about their brand. So some of the new into the market manufacturers that I've been talking to, you say, well, what do you do? And they just bring it back to the dealer. Well, how big's your dealer network? Uh, it's not massive. Okay, so whereas what to the traditional OEMs in Europe don't have the same pains as they do in the States because of geographical distances. So, if you're OEM A and you're in Europe and you can drive 10 minutes and go to, you know, A's dealership in America, you might have to drive an hour or 2 hours. So it's very different. So the the understanding of the US OEMs or the representatives of those OEMs is very different to Europe. Well, that's sort of switching round the other way now. So if you think about some of these new entrants that have got you know dealerships, but they're very few and far between. What happens if somebody gets a puncture? They're not going to turn around and go back to the dealership. What happens if they get a crack in the windscreen? Then again, they're going to go to the glass people. They're going to go to the tire shops. Um, so it's really important to try and explain that, and they're getting it. I think more now that okay, well, we need a really good aftermarket. the aftermarket is the aftermarket, and it's a bit like the going through the various stages of businesses that I've gone through. Of you try and come up with a solution. You haven't got the official way of doing it, but you engineer a new way of doing something. Well, that isn't always the best approach. So the best practice is always the best way of doing it. So having the right information, the right data is the right way of doing it. So it's basically saying, okay, if you want your brand to survive in the eyes of the driver, then you've really got to support these people that are actually really repairing your car. Because yeah, okay, you take it to a glass company, they put a new screen in it, or they do a repair or whatever. How do they know it's right? Well, the driver finds out whether it's right or not. Now, it's either going to take a massive accident, which is what happened with TPMS back in the whenever it was, in the US, where there was the big accident with a Ford, I think it was, where the tire pressures were wrong, and that's why TPMS came around. So what we don't want is for there to be people driving around, which unfortunately there are now, people driving around with cars with driver assistant features that don't work properly because they haven't been calibrated, or the vehicle has been repaired properly. We do.
Yeah.
These people in the aftermarket know what they're doing. They know how
Yeah.
to fix stuff, but don't necessarily understand the knock-on effects of some of the other systems. So we talk about the 1 degree thing of one degree of movement in the bumper, or in the windscreen. When you're talking about a few hundred meters in front of you, that's all of a sudden that becomes a big error. A lot of systems can self-learn and those sorts of things, but you really need to know before you hand a vehicle back.
And the aftermarket needs the help of the OEM to do that, right?
Yeah,
And that's that relationship, I suppose.
yeah.
And if you're looking sort of back to kind of when you first kind of came into the industry, what sort of advice would you give, to yourself, today?
There are lots of things that I would have done, and probably been retired on a yacht somewhere. I don't like yachts, but I'm scared of the water. But um, yeah, so there's loads of stuff. I mean, like I mentioned, back in 2001, there was this huge database of information that had been collated over a good number of years, and really it needed the foresight of somebody to go, you know what, this is what we need to do moving forward, and we're playing catch up now. And so Vlad, I met him last year. We went to an event hosted by GTAC, who are a member of ours, and there was a walkthrough of a scenario which involved KPIT, who are all over the place in terms of being in with OEMs for software and various different things. Really interesting business. Um, and they were talking about their software, and it was using, for example, it was using the GTAC hardware, and it was taking the conversation that was right at the beginning of a car coming into a dealership, looking at what the problems or what the conversation goes like in terms of, have you got any issues, or sort of thing. So that goes on the report. AI gets hold of it and goes, okay, well, they mentioned this, and this. So it then queries the car over the air, gets some fault code information. When it then arrives at the dealership on the day that it's booked in, the technician can have a look and say, tell me about, I mean, the demonstration basically was talking to the laptop, tell me about, job number XYZ. And it said that the customer's rung with da 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 da. I think that it could be one of these 5 things, and I'm weighting it towards that. So then the technician says, well, can you give me this? Can you do that? Take some measurements, and then what do you think now? What's the most probable cause? And then it jumbles it up and it says in this particular instance, it was an evap hose. So it was really interesting.
This is your Access database brought to life, right?
Well, yeah. So it is that. Yeah. I mean, it's you could train the model with all of that data, and you could keep feeding that information in from technical support lines, globally, OEM technical support.
Self-learning.
Yeah. I mean, it just becomes, be fixing cars in 2 minutes. Then Vlad started to talk about the micro learning and what Bridge LT do in terms of putting together the bite-sized training modules, and obviously then you've got the simulators and stuff. But in that particular instance, this is how the system works. So the technician who and you go on your training course and you retain X amount of information. Is it 60% of the information ish? So you get a nice little refresher on how it works, and then what tools do I need? Well, it can tell you what tools you need. How do I do it? And then it tells you how to do it. And then once you've done it, it can then feed back into the system. And then if it didn't fix it, well, then it goes back in and it learns from that. So that to me is really fascinating. And I think, again, looking at how people learn these days, attention spans and all of these sorts of things that people talk about, this whole idea of giving people the information at the time they need it. I mean, we've been doing it for quite a while with YouTube. I mean,
Yep.
it's just one of those things that you pick up your phone and
That's it.
You can watch a little YouTube clip and
or TikTok, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
It is.
And like I say, I went through these, and I still do go through these phases of, it's not got long left, has it? And then all of a sudden, ta-da, something else pops up.
The bar just keeps
Yeah.
and on both sides, right?
Yeah. And that's what's really exciting about this industry is that, people just keep pushing.
I love it.
Yeah.
So look, I'm going to finish off with some quick fire kind of questions. So first
Okay.
thing that comes into your head, okay? If you could instantly download any skill into your brain, like in the Matrix, what would it be?
Languages.
Any particular language?
Oh, any particular? I'd have to have two. French and German.
Okay.
Yeah. In my industry.
In your current role, of course, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Dream passenger to share the ride with?
My son.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's safe territory. I like that. One piece of tech from a sci-fi that you wish existed today?
I'd like to say transportation, but then we'd end up with everybody all of a sudden wanting to transport themselves to a beach in Bali or something. So yeah, that would end up as a bit of a disaster.
And if you could teleport, where would be the first place you went?
I'd like to have a look at another planet.
Yeah?
Nothing in particular, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you could see the world from there as well, right? It'd be lovely to see
the
Earth,
it would be.
I think.
Yeah.
Very humbling from what I hear.
Yes.
Ultimate driving song?
It's an Elton John song, and there's a reason for this. And it's I Want to Kiss the Bride. I think that might be the title. It's definitely some of the lyrics. Hopefully the owner of the vehicle isn't listening to this, but when I was doing the job at the performance tuning place, I had a girlfriend, and I used to go around for lunch sometimes. She was going off to university, and when she was home, I'd go around for lunch. And I had a Nissan 300ZX twin turbo that we'd done some work on. And I'm really careful about, I'm not a lunatic driver. I don't think that it's appropriate. And, I'm really all about safety in vehicles. So it wasn't the idea of going and driving fast anywhere or being a lunatic. It was just a machine that was absolutely fantastic, and and the guy said to me that owned it, he said, "Oh, when you own one of these, you have to have hands of a 3-year-old and pockets of a millionaire." And I thought, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, you've got to have really small hands to work on it, and everything you do to it costs a fortune." Well, that was a good one. So anyway, I had to go and test it. So we had to test drive the vehicles sometimes. We had rolling road, and we developed our own rolling road as well, which was exciting. So I went round to hers for lunch and, this beautiful vehicle. And I put the radio, or I put his stereo on, and he had a CD, and that's the song that came on. And I don't know, things stick with you, don't they? And that just stuck with me that, this was something that, at that age, I'd never have dreamt of driving. I suppose a lot of people would say, oh, what about Ferraris and
Yeah.
Lamborghinis? But this thing was, a really fantastic piece of kit.
Perfect song for a perfect car.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And finally, what Marvel superpower would you love to have?
I would love to be able to fly. Yeah, so I'd like a suit that would enable me to do that because I think that's just amazing. I think birds are. If I come back, there's something else. I'd like to come back as a bird because I think that's just wonderful. Yeah.
Well, the way aviation and automotive are coming together, you may well have that wish fulfilled.
Yeah, I'm not so into the whole flying car thing, but yeah, yeah, and it's got a way to go yet.
Winston, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.